Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with Cybersecurity. This is a very special event because for the first time, we are actually going to do an extra episode of Conversations with Cybersecurity tomorrow. And for that, you have to register at www.bpda2020.com. But tonight, we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Tami Erickson. She has been a regular on this show, and she constantly takes notes on her stickies. And I don't know, maybe she'll talk about it today. We'll find out. Tami, please introduce yourself to everyone.
Hi, everybody. I am a regular on Dr. Hasib's show. I'm Dr. Tami Erickson. Thank you, Dr. Hasib, for having me as an actual guest this evening. I have a PhD, so we'll run down my education. I have a PhD in organizational leadership, a master's in public administration. I have 2 bachelors, one in criminal justice and one in psychology, and an associate's in psychology as well.
Wow.
I have a few certificates along the way, but who knows what they are in anymore. I, I forget them along the way, and they're probably old at this point. I have been in the higher education industry for about 20 years now, so that is my claim to fame at this moment. I have worked in financial aid admissions in the education department. I still actually am an adjunct faculty today. But I am really focused on compliance, accreditation, those worlds, federal government, anything related to that in the for-profit industry. And that's where I spent the last maybe 17 years of that for-profit world.
Nice.
Yes, so I now own a company called Bit of Everything. And literally it is that. Not only have I done a bit of everything in the higher education world, but I also do a little bit of everything now, higher education being the core of that business, but I also do small business development. So if you're a small business needing a little help on digital marketing, I don't know what to do. Heck, I don't even know how to use Facebook, call me. And I do a lot of 503Cs, raising money. I've even ridden Longhorns through town to raise money for a 503C. So it's a little bit of fun. If I haven't mentioned it here and you don't know if I do it, I probably do, because after all, I'm a bit of everything. So that is my lovely introduction for the day. So like the infomercials say, call me, click me.
I tell you, that is absolutely one of the best sounding and looking introduction we've ever done, because you had that whole like camera, everything in there. It was a full production. Wonderful. So you should do
Thank you.
videos like that.
Maybe I could do that. I am a bit of everything.
There
I'll
you
do
go.
that.
There you go.
So, as Dr. Hasib and I have kind of alluded to in some of our posts, as we've talked about a little bit, I do collect sticky notes from Dr. Hasib every week. He's had 20. This is his 20th episode. I have attended 18 of them.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And I only know that because I have
Now I get to
18
learn
sticky.
what I said, right?
So you get to learn what you said. I get to call you on the table. So originally I learned about Dr. Hasib from Liz DeRosa, Dr. Liz DeRosa. So thank you very much for introducing the two of us and networking together. It's been fantastic. And so what I do with my sticky notes, because yes, I haven't said anything about those sticky notes or what on them. That's the cliffhanger. Every week I collect a sticky note, something that Dr. Hasib says that I go, I'm going to do that all week long. I'm focusing on that one sticky note all week long. Well, now that I have 18 of these sticky notes, they've sort of built upon themselves. And I practice these things all week long. Sometimes I practice on 2 or 3 of them to see what kind of results I get. So Dr. Hasib, with my sticky notes, what I did over the last week is I put these sticky notes of things that you've put together and I've made them into categories. So then I'm going to ask you just a little bit more deeper about putting these pieces together and how to make it maybe a full circle for me and how I can use these categories together. So this may be an interesting fun. If you have to do it, might as well be fun. It's one of my core values. So let's start with this one. It might be a little easier to get us started.
All right.
So one of my first sticky notes that I have is that it says create trust. You say that very frequently. So I worked 1 week on creating trust. You said that you create trust by building relationships.
Wow.
So I focused on that, right? This is good, right?
This is good.
Little fun thing in there, and you talked about innovation.
Oh my God.
You talk about innovation a lot. So now my question is, if I'm building trust through partnerships, what innovative ways can I use to continue to build trust and build those relationships in an innovative way?
Well, we're already doing it. I mean, this whole forum is one of the biggest innovations I think I've done in a long time. And it was a pure accident. And that's almost how innovation works all the time, right? You try about 10 things at the same time, see which one is a little bit more effective, what's resonating with people, and also you have to do it in a way that nobody else is doing it because you don't want to be buried in the noise. So I saw that what most other people were doing was that they were interviewing people. So that's actually a barrier for the interviewee because the interviewee has to now be a pretty good subject matter expert. I didn't want that. I wanted anybody and everybody to be able to come to this forum. If they're experts, no problem. They will provide more context and then ask a question. But if they're a student starting out and really want some help and want to talk about their problem, well, they can also. All they have to do is talk a little bit about themselves for 1 to 2 minutes and then ask a question, right? So I think that, so now you talk about innovation. Your sticky notes and what you just said, that immediately actually gave me this idea that one day when, or maybe even in this forum, you and I should consider doing a workshop because you have already collected a lot of these things. You've already categorized them also. Well, isn't it possible that we could do a 1 to 2 hour actual workshop? And you and I would facilitate that and have breakout rooms and all that. And I mean, that's innovation. And that's the other thing about relationships and trust. When you start trusting people and you build these relationships, this beautiful magic happens where just something that somebody does or says triggers a completely new idea. And that's how, remember all those ideas that often come up on a dinner napkin table because friends are sitting at a dinner, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, that's the forum we have created here, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think of that?
I think that's really good. Exactly. That's, I mean, this is a whole learning experience. And I probably should have told the audience, I have no, other than creating curriculum for cybersecurity and not knowing cybersecurity until I read the book. Now I at least know the definition. I came to this blind not knowing cybersecurity, but what I found from this group is learning a lot about these sticky notes. All right. So how about these 3 or 4? All right. Okay.
Another category.
Another category. It's like playing some sort of game show. You always say the CEO is the brand. And I apologize if there's any misspellings on these or any of that. This is all raw. This is just my raw notes that I take.
Yeah.
The knowledge is your brand and how many followers you have is
Yeah.
what's making you up today, right? That's important. Lord knows I'm
Yes.
trying to get to 5,000 by December. And then the next sticky note, they're stuck together. You are as smart as your network, which I
Oh
believe,
my
because
God. You
I
have
have
done such an
four,
amazing job of this.
I have four of my best network friends on here today,
Wow. We should do a
which
gallery just to show them. This is a gallery view of the amazing people.
this is an amazing gallery of what Dr. Hasib says every week.
Ah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Cross
And
brand.
then you create with all of these as CEO, that you're the brand as the CEO of your company, and that you're creating followers, and that you're as smart as your network. What are some ideas? This is obviously one, but what are some other ideas that you have in mind to create cross brand promotions?
Well, right now we are creating that right now. I believe this episode that we're doing right now will cross promote both of us in a way that we couldn't have. And if you think about it, it took the two instrument players, you and me, to produce this harmony. I think do more of those kinds of things because again, you're experimenting and you're watching who's doing what. I had no idea anybody would even do these sticky notes. You just happened to do it. Well, that is the beauty, that somebody does something so unique and so interesting that starts to trigger a whole new direction that you start to explore. I believe that that is probably what I would do because even, for example, the special episode of this Conversations with Dr. Cybersecurity tomorrow. Initially, I had not thought about doing anything like that. I had thought that people would come and sponsor this show. Well, guess what? A conference said, we like what you are doing over there. Why don't you do a special episode for us over there? And I said, well, do you want me to get the guests? And they said, well, if you can, that's okay. I said, very hard for me to get guests in one day because we're doing this tomorrow. But if you have some guests and you have some people that can ask this kind of a question, and I'm sure you have a conference going on, and you have conference attendees, maybe they will just ask us questions as members of the audience. And I can try to bring maybe a couple of my mentees because those are special. Those are the mentees that I did the episode last time with. Remember, I had a special background with two of my mentees who had won awards. I said, look, these two young women have won awards and they have done what I expect everybody should be doing, which is bring out that extraordinary thing that is already inside you, okay? Don't be ordinary because being ordinary is no fun. You already have the extraordinariness inside you, the greatness inside you. And those two mentees of mine are examples of that because that's what I told them 3 years ago. I said, you already have it, but you can't just do it in an instant. That never happens because it's experimentation, finding yourself, believing in yourself, and then starting to bring out that unique quality that you have. And that might be your singing ability, your dancing ability, your music ability, your ability to use lights, video, sound, all of these things. In other words, bring your entire self to that experience. In a way, if you think about, I am doing that. I love colors, I love beauty, and I love sound, music, people. So in a way, all of the things that I'm doing kind of brings all of that together in this harmony. And that's what makes me unique, and my uniqueness starts to shine out. But the same way, anybody can do that, right? I mean, nobody should ever try to be like me because that would not be authentic. That would never work. But you could take ideas and bring out in your own unique way whatever it is that you're going to do, right?
Right. Ready for the next set?
All right.
Okay. You talk about continuous improvement.
Mm.
I'm all about that, obviously, from compliance. accreditation, internal audit, those things, all about continuous improvement. And then you've always talked about it won't be perfect.
Right.
So my question comes from those two pieces is that when something's not perfect, sometimes that happens. In fact, that happens a lot.
Absolutely.
How do you overcome that? Because people seem to remember your failures more than your wins. How do you get them to remember your wins and not your failures?
Yes, 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 yes. So this is a very, very common problem, and I'm so glad that you mentioned that. This is one of the things that I keep asking my students and mentees. And I say, look, in the old world where you couldn't change things very easily, perfection or as close to perfect was essential and required and helpful. But in the modern world, especially if you're in control of all the things that you're doing, then try to get it out there so you can get feedback from your network, because that is how you're going to refine something. So this is why, I mean, even the very simple thing as this background that I have, this virtual background, this has changed dramatically from the very first episode. Again, through experimentation. Is it perfect? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm probably going to change it because that change itself is also fun. People might say, oh, what virtual background is Dr. Hasib going to have next? And what is it going to mean? And you could do that, right? So I think that is the key, because I learned as soon as I learned that I could do new editions of anything. And that is why I tell people, make sure that you never give up any of your writings or work to anybody else where you lose complete control of it. You must retain 100% control. And so that is why you shouldn't be afraid. Somebody was writing a bio today and she's like, it's not perfect. I said, it doesn't need to be. I need to get it out today, right now. Right? That one extra thing that you put in there is not going to make a difference. What's going to make a difference is what you do tomorrow and how good you look tomorrow and talk tomorrow. That's what's going to make the difference. When you put out the new edition of the bio for your next episode, it'll be fine. My bio has changed dramatically. I mean, from just last week to this week.
My resume changes daily lately because I'm on so many podcasts and I'm writing so many things. And somebody said to me the other day, your resume doesn't match your LinkedIn. And I said, I can't keep up with it. Do you want to hire me or not? All right. So you talked about think differently.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So you love your words, they come back.
This is amazing. This is such a gift to me. I cannot believe it.
Compete on value. Like I said, use cross, so there's mistakes.
Right. Never compete on cost, compete on value, right?
Right. And then you talk about make fun of it or make it fun.
Yes.
So if you're thinking differently, but you still want to compete on value, how do you make fun of the work that you have to do?
I think a lot of the fun is in that mindset, because I believe that if you approach the day and if you approach that episode as, oh, it's going to be fun. See, this same episode, this conversation, I could have stressed myself out. Oh my God, I got to talk to all these people and think of all these questions.
And what's Tami got on her sticky notes? Right.
Or I could approach it and say, I'm just going to have a fun time. I'm going to explore what she has. In other words, I opened up my mind to that possibility of having the fun. When I do that, I believe no matter what happens, you kind of have fun, because a lot of things that has happened in this last 15 minutes or so, I had no clue it was going to happen, right?
So, I have kept my sticky notes secret from everyone. Ask Liz and Linda. I have not shared them. I wouldn't tell a single peep.
That is amazing. So do you have any more sticky notes?
3 more. So okay. Last set.
All right.
Quit talking about the problems and
Ah,
focus on the solution. I think you were talking about something cybersecurity related for that, but I interpreted it to me. Be part of the solution.
yes.
And what are you trying to achieve?
Yes.
So when you put those all together,
Yes.
what techniques, when you are somebody like myself as a consultant, you listen to people, it's almost like I do like those old dolls where you pull the belly, you pull the string, and it's like play and rewind, play and rewind, play and rewind. I hope we're all old enough to remember those. And how do you really get your clients or your people, or even students for that matter, because I have those too, play, rewind, play, rewind. How do you get them out of the problem and get them to move forward to that
Right,
solution?
right. I think that some of the early ones that you mentioned is key. They have to trust you as the mentor. See, if that trust as a mentor is not there, because this happens, especially with the students, because they will resist. They will resist doing something. Why? Because it's hard. And it's hard. And I tell them why it's hard. I say it's hard because your brain and your body isn't used to what I'm asking you to do. But you see, you have to invest in that hard work because the brain, just like any other part of the body, is also like a muscle. You can exercise it, you can change it, you can grow it, and you can make all those new connections in your brain. And that is the hard work. But once you achieve that hard work and you do that hard work, guess what? It's a permanent change. And that is, I think, telling them that, and then them believing that I'm saying that for their best interest, I think that goes a long way, particularly with the students. And this is why I think I mentioned this in some of the previous episodes. Like I've had maybe 25 students in a class, but like 2 or 3 of them, it doesn't matter. For whatever reason, we could never, I guess, establish the trust that what I'm doing is for their good. And so whatever reason, I never reach them. And that happens. So I'm also okay with that. There are some clients that won't happen, that we will never get to that mutual goal and mutual trust. But with the ones that we do get there, I think it's usually fun and everything. And that is why sometimes you have to drop clients also. You don't take every client, right? I don't, certainly.
I know, yeah. Well, that is thank you so much. Those were my sticky notes that I've been taking over those were 18 sticky notes of your words for the last 18 weeks. So thank
That
you
is
so much for your
absolutely
wisdom.
awesome. What a gift you gave to me, Dr. Tami Erickson. A complete summary of the last 19 episodes of Conversations with Dr. Cybersecurity. Look out. We're probably going to do a workshop together.
We just
Now,
might.
there you go.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I would like to bring in my very, very good friend, and we haven't chatted in a while, and he is Todd Bell. He's a very seasoned cybersecurity leader, chief information security officer, and just a great thought leader and a very, very good human being. So Todd, please introduce yourself and let's chat.
All right. Well, thank you for that warm welcome. Much appreciated. Right out of the gate, I'm not a PhD. I'm just a regular guy with just an MBA and a BS degree. So, Mansur and I, we met about 6 years ago, and there's something that we both have something in common. We both have been chief information security officers, and we've been CIOs for companies. And we met actually in Scottsdale going to a convention together. And after the convention, struck up a friendship. And then next thing you know, he created this cybersecurity leadership book. And I did the audio review of this. And this is where we're just so aligned from a philosophical perspective and leadership perspective that this is how we were able to kind of share our experiences in the trench moments of what works, what doesn't work, having our butts handed to us from a political perspective, good outcomes, not so great outcomes. And so, so I'm a 15-year veteran that's had the opportunity to work on the technology side of the house and cybersecurity side of the house. So I've got into corporations as a hired gun, going as their interim cybersecurity chief to right now I've been working with the banking as a service here in Scottsdale, and just recently relocated here. And one of the things that's really interesting about my current situation and previous jobs, and that was going to be my topic, is that many of us come from what I call hybrid environments. And what a hybrid environment is, you have a lot of on-premise technology and you have a mix of cloud technologies. And this was the first time that I stepped into a role that was 100% cloud. We didn't have a single server, not a virtual machine, and we use what's called resources in data centers. And so we didn't have any enterprise software whatsoever. And where I'm going with this is that how do you go from this little scrappy startup that does this banking as a service, yet can scale and compete against the Wells Fargos and the Chase banks, and being able to have that kind of firepower, but not have to invest all the millions of dollars? And what it really comes down to is software as a service, not owning anything. We don't own any software whatsoever. We use heavily the Microsoft Azure environment. We use an API management platform and custom developed a mobile app that we outsourced to a couple of companies to help develop for us. Yet we're able to scale at such a huge perspective of how can we compete as this little scrappy startup against these big behemoth companies that have been around, that have invested capitally millions of dollars. And what it really comes down to is a monthly subscription service to all these enterprise services. So the kind of what's in it for your audience members is that if you've ever been thinking about how could I start a small business but have the ability to operate as an enterprise scale company, and if you really start to do your research, you're going to find out that you can build a mega company in your living room. And while that seems really strange, we did it with a team of 12 people. And so where I'm going with this here is that in my company as a chief security and trust officer, I was a one-man show. I'm used to having cybersecurity teams just like you, Mansur. And in this situation, not only was I forced to have to understand everything of being a full administrator for our systems and platforms, but also recognizing that automation is really starting to take off to a perspective that when it comes to endpoint management, I can have the Microsoft Azure take care of it. For my access controls, I can hire all these third-party vendors that can do all these cybersecurity services for me. So we typically refer to them as security as a service or managed security service provider. And the beauty about this is that I didn't need the mega team that many people want in an organization. And we always hear things about, some people are promoting about how there's this cybersecurity talent shortage. And I think that there's some truth to, you know, like for individual contributors, whether it be security engineers, security architects, business analysts, or system analysts. Yeah, those are certainly in demand positions. But when you get to director and above, there's a ton of talent that's available. And the cybersecurity problem isn't as bad as it appears to be. And the thing is that what I'm seeing from a future of cybersecurity is teams are actually starting to shrink. And this was an opportunity for me to see what the future of cybersecurity looks like, because I think we've been conditioned, and Mansur, I think that you've gone through this, is that When you're the CISO, you always want more. You're asking for a bigger budget. You want more people. You want more resources. You want more tools. And now that we have the advent of all these cloud provided services, now we're able to actually scale to a different perspective that it doesn't require all the cybersecurity talent that we're accustomed to. So where this is going is that we're now able to do cybersecurity for pennies on the dollar of what we're used to. So now, Mansur, I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on this here and kind of what you see for the future of cybersecurity, because you're obviously grooming a lot of students for the future, and just like to hear your perspectives.
Right. So I think that what you're talking about, the very first thing that has to be done is your definition of cybersecurity. Because is it possible that you are looking at just the security aspects or some other things like that? Or are you looking at the total strategy and the business strategy of the organization? So what is your definition of cybersecurity when you're doing this?
It would be all inclusive to setting the cybersecurity vision, what the architecture is going to look like, what we're going to be monitoring. We're going to be looking at the compliance components. We're going to be looking at disaster recovery, business continuity.
Who's meeting the business goals? Who's defining the systems that meet the mission of the organization?
And that's usually done jointly with like the CTO, myself, and also my other IT executive peers. And so we help craft that vision. So I get their perspective for what they need from a cybersecurity perspective. And then vice versa, that whenever they're defining future architecture, how do we make business strategy goals? How do we meet customer goals? And so we have this relationship collaborative process that we help set goals for each other.
Okay, so it almost sounds like somebody, and what is the reporting relationship? Is the reporting relationship between CTO and you?
It is.
Peers or?
Yeah, so I report into a CTO.
You report in. Okay. So therefore you are actually working in that same way that I talk about in the book, which is that your CIO, CTO, and the CISO is joined in the hip. They have the more of the strategic mission, business-oriented kinds of roles, and you are in that a little bit more on the operational side of things, and together you have some common things that you work together. You can probably back each other up, and that's probably a great relationship, and that is a good relationship. You talk about the future. Well, the future, I have always said that take this relationship now and remember the old relationship that used to exist between the CEO and the CFO, where the CEO is trying to do the mission and then the CFO is trying to finance it and all that.
Yeah.
Take the CTO and the CISO, move that up. You really don't need the finance-oriented CEO and the CFO anymore. You've probably heard me say that multiple times, because today that digital strategy is the business strategy. You will often find that the finance CEOs and the finance CFOs are going to stifle your situation. They're going to make you cut costs, because it is possible when you go into this whole cloud environment, they often won't understand the true risks of the cloud environment. And it is huge, because in a cloud, you have to still have diverse clouds. You still have to have a disaster recovery plan. You still have to own your innovation. You cannot outsource innovation. So the people part, a lot of people outsource the people part also, the innovation part. That's the part that is your intellectual capital. If you outsource that, you're pretty much dead in the water. That is not a future-oriented company. I don't see that as the future of the company. People that are going to go that way are going to become hostage to these vendors. They're never going to get the benefits of all the innovation, because the vendor might be innovating, but then they will charge you. But you're basically paying for that innovation up front anyway. right? Why don't you bring those people in? Yes, I don't want to run the servers. That's okay. But the real intellectual capital, I don't want to ever outsource that. Because if you
Well, let me
outsource
put
that,
some parameters around that because, you know, we do have the secret sauce of the employees. You know, when you have a staff of 12, we didn't require to have the mega staff because there are lower level tasks that could be outsourced. And does that really add a lot of strategic value to an organization? The answer is no, on something like that. But I think it was from an abstract perspective that if I think about, you know, some prior situations, because I do advise companies on their direction and, you know, I do analyst calls every week and I get to talk to different organizations. And I think it's kind of an interesting perspective about does the CEO really understand what's happening from a technology perspective? Because there's one thing that was very unique to our organization, very, very tech heavy. And if you weren't much of a technologist, it would have been a hard environment for you to thrive in.
okay.
And so we have some folks that were definitely not technologists, had the good ideas, but the flip side of it is I get to talk to startups and, you know, you look at, you know, for every 10 startups, there are only one is going to really work. You know, 1 out of 10, 90% of them are going to fail.
Absolutely right.
And where we see that failure point is really at the execution phase. And they have the great ideas, but they just can't execute.
Yes.
And that's where these startups fail. Great ideas failing. And so, you know, this is where I think, you know, your leadership perspectives come into play because this is where they blow it. And so, you know, because there's this component where we've seen a lot of developer turned CEOs. And I'll tell you right now, and I'm happy to go on the record, they're terrible CEOs. I don't care what anybody says. They just flat out don't know how to run a freaking business. You know, they have a great idea. They know how to code, but running the books, come on, you know, they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, that is what I have
So
recommended
you
to
need
almost
an
all
expert.
of them. Yeah, get seasoned people to run it. You still can be the genius behind everything, but let somebody run the company and you will do much better. That's what Google did originally. See, if you remember.
Well, yeah, they had to bring in a real CEO that was kind of the adult supervision because, you know, if you look at the roots of the company, a couple of developers turned executives and, you know, incredible accomplishment. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not here to diminish anybody's accomplishments.
No.
But when it comes down to when you become a publicly traded company or you're asking for VC money, you got to have your A game together. And especially in this current environment, you know, trying to ask for money right now is just painful. Everybody is very scared to loan money. You know, we have so much uncertainty. You know, we got an election ahead of us here. And right now, everybody is, you know, kind of queasy about making investments right now. So this is why it's so important to have solid execution, solid leadership, because leadership, if you don't have a good leadership team in place, it just doesn't work.
Yep. No, the other thing is that you were talking about outsourcing some of the lower level, but you see, I always worry about succession planning. And I always want to build because you talk about lower level, I don't see anything lower. To me, anything that helps me get to my intellectual capital and all that, there is value in that. And so I'm big about building succession into the company. So for example, help desk. A lot of people think outsource the help desk. No, that is where I was building my people. You see, I would rotate them out of there and I would often put even the systems people, second, third level people back in the help desk for a little while because help desk is a very burnout kind of a job. Many of the lower levels are very burnout oriented, but you see, in order to keep people energized, refreshed, I need to rotate them into various parts of the company. So I'm one of those people that don't put people in a straitjacket. I'm always building them so that they will have a broad perspective of the entire company.
Well, I agree to a certain extent, and maybe where there might be a little bit of a different perspective is that we're always constant pressure to, let's say we need a developer and we need to have some low level stuff that we're going to keep the high level work, stateside. We're going to keep it with our employees. And that's our intellectual capital. And then maybe we need to have some lower level tasks performed. We can have that performed in a different country for a fraction of the cost that, we're expected to do that. Now, does that always work? Heck no. But it comes down to those relationships weren't set up from the very get-go. And, because if you think about, there's been plenty of situations that people did outsource, the help desk function. We've seen so many help desks do a 180 that came right back to the States because it wasn't set up from the get-go.
Right.
The
Often
economics.
that is the most critical element of your entire company. If the support is not good.
Oh, and it happens with the executives. Oh, that gets yanked really quick because once they have a few of those moments, kind of like, okay, this is terrible. I don't care how much we're saving. So I think that what was really critical to our success is that we have a mindset of that we kind of look at things holistically, that we want to look at our employees as the intellectual capital, but I kind of shifted my mindset that, well, my business partners are a part of my intellectual capital. And so when we have partnerships with these businesses, they're strategic vendors. They're not your run-of-the-mill vendor. They're a part of the secret sauce. That we need people that can understand our environment, how we operate, what we believe in, what the end goals are. And we try to find those type of partners that are mutually aligned with us. And we usually have those very good synergies because it's how we're able to deliver results very quickly. But that takes a significant effort to be investing in those relationships, because I think a common thing that I see with CIOs and even CISOs is always treated as kind of like an us and them. And they're not looking at them as true business partners, that this is just an extension of my team. And I see that as a common pitfall. And I'm sure you've seen that many times. And
Yeah, what I've seen is that they may work for a little while because a lot of these relationships work on personalities. And often when a personality changes or a personnel changes, everything is thrown topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
If you remember from my book, one of the things that I talked about even there was that I always saw outsourcing and offshoring and all of that as a danger to intellectual capital loss. Well, guess what's happening now? We're seeing a lot of reshoring back, right?
Oh yeah.
And the problem has always been that, yeah, you think of them as business partners or whatever, but things change, governments change, this changes, that changes. There's just so many possible changes that at some point it becomes unreliable. And in the meantime, you've lost the intellectual capital and it's very hard to build that up.
Well, I think it takes a lot of work effort and I've seen this in the huge corporations where, let's say it's a consumer goods company, they hire HP to be their outsourced vendor to run all the IT operations. I've seen such toxic relationships that it comes down to, if you're not investing in those strategic relationships, that if they're running your IT, you better have a really good dialogue, because when you don't, it impacts the entire organization from a performance perspective, because response times are slow. There's no desire to innovate on these platforms. It's just, well, I'm just doing the bare minimum. I'm doing what's in the contract. That there's no spirit of trying to innovate. And when we look at what's happening right now, we see a lot of retailers that are just, bombing left and right. And there's a common theme. And what was their online presence? What was their e-commerce experience like? And it's more critical than ever that we have to execute so well that there's no room for error. Right now, everybody's got to be hitting on all cylinders because the runway's got really short from a survivability perspective if you're a retailer. And, how does a company like Lululemon shine above all these other vendors out there that are filing bankruptcy? You know, why does Lululemon stand out from the crowd, and what are they doing that's so different? And surprisingly, I was on their website and I was just kind of, you know, looking at the company, what they stand for, and also even their jobs. You know, they get you excited where, you know, I was seeing like individual contributor jobs and I was getting excited over those jobs. And it came down to the philosophy, how they operate, what they believe in, and leadership. And they actually had core values. And
So they have a culture.
yeah, they have a culture. And
That is the other thing that is very difficult when you have all these multiple organizations, whether you call them business partners or whatever, they're all going to have different cultures. It's very hard to build a culture within the company. And it's even harder to build that same culture when you have all these business partners that are kind of core to your mission. If they're core to the mission, I would prefer to build that culture myself. But it was absolutely fantastic to talk with you and catch up with you, Todd. I really, really enjoyed catching up with you. And now I'm going to stop the recording and we're going to go into the networking session.
all right.